Good morning, class.
Good morning, Mr. Reed.
Very good. You can say good morning, Mr. Reed.
Good morning, Mr. Reed.
So today we'll have a spelling lesson. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Very good. And the spelling lessons really are designed to have one part of the lesson on the first day and another part of the lesson on the second day. We're going to do them in two parts today. Would that be all right?
Yes.
Very good. So I'll have you at the table for the first part, and then we'll switch for the second part. So you may be seated. And the first thing that we're going to do is number our papers from 1 to 12.
Shall we do head or heading?
You may do that. That would be fine. When we number the paper, where will we put the numbers?
On the red line.
What's that red line called? Does anybody know? It's called the margin. The margin, yes. Does our paper look neater if we don't write across the red line? Except for our numbers, maybe? Yeah. So let's number our papers. Okay, and if you're in your seats at the desks, I'll know that you're ready if your pencils are down. That helps me to know. This is not a test. This is the dictation of the spelling words. Okay? So you can just write spelling, that would be fine. Are you ready, Michaela? Very good. Okay, and before we start with the dictation, I want to tell you that one of the controls we're working on today is a control where we have three letters put together, I-N-D. Does anybody know what I-N-D says? Let's see, and your name is Zoe, is that right? Zoe, what does I-N-D say? Sometimes it might say end, and that would just be I alone that says I. Let's see, Ethan. What else could it say? It could say eind. That's right. So if we had the word K-I-N-D, it would be kind. Now, if we had the word W-I-N-D, well, we'd probably have to see that in a sentence, wouldn't we? Because if you said that's an I alone, it says I, the word would be wind. If we said that's I-N-D that says eind, the word would be wind. Which one is correct? Both. It depends on the sentence, doesn't it? So most words we can just look at and we can say, oh, that word is kind, or that word is taste, and we can read the word. But there are some words that we really need to see in a sentence before we know for sure. So if we said W-I-N-D, we'd have to say, well, that's either wind or wind. And that's one of the reasons it's so important for us when we're spelling words to hear them in, we call it context, to hear it in a story. Because that helps us to keep it in our mental image. And then we know exactly what we're talking about. We don't have to guess if it's I alone that says I or I-N-D that says eind. Okay? And so to do that, I'm going to read a spelling story to you. And we're going to repeat the story together as we go through our spelling words. Will that be good? And let's, in the top margin of our page, let's just write I-N-D, just as a little bit of a reminder. If we're not quite sure how to make a sound, we'll write I-N-D because it'll probably be eind, okay, because that's the control we're working on today.
Will some of them not have I-N-D for them?
I think many of them will have I-N-D for the control, yes, but not all of them because how boring would that be, right, Jude? Right. So I'm going to begin by telling you the first part of the story, and then you're going to repeat the story with me. Now, Would you like me to give you a little hint about how to remember the story? Would you like that? All right, but you can't tell anybody. It's a secret. All right. Don't try to memorize it. Because the things we try to memorize, guess what we do? We forget them. Don't we? Have you ever tried to memorize anything? Yeah, and then you forget. So instead of trying to memorize it, try to see it in your mental image. Because if you can see it, you'll remember it. If you try to memorize it, you'll forget it. So we're just going to see it in our mental image. If you forget, I'll repeat it to you, and we'll say it together. Now, after we've got some words on our page, we're going to point to the words with our pencil, each word that we repeat, and that will help us to remember the words as we move forward. Does that sound good? Okay, now the other thing that I'm going to ask you to do is not to write the control until we're finished with all of the spelling words. Because as soon as we're finished with the spelling word, I want us to start right back into the story. So we're not going to write the controls until the end, and then I'll let you write the controls for all of the spelling words. Fair enough?
Are we going to write the story you tell us?
You're not going to write the story. We're just going to use the story to remember the words. Okay? So we'll just say the story, but we're not going to write the story. We'll just write the words, and I'll tell you which ones to write. Okay? Sound good? All right. Are we ready? Yes. All right. So here's the first sentence. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. Now I'm going to, since I made a mistake, repeat it again. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. Let's repeat it together. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. Now I'm going to say the first word, and then I will sound it out to you, and as I sound it, you're going to tell me how to spell it and write it at the same time. All right? Just like you did yesterday in class. Are you ready? The first word is kind. And you repeat the word? Kind. Ka. And say, how do we spell that? K-I-N-D. And the word is kind. And now we're ready to repeat. See if we can remember it. Ready? Amy is a kind girl who did not mind feeding the serviceman's, or the blind serviceman's, animal. Number 2 is mind. Repeat it. Mind. Mind. Right. Now, normally when we spell a word, we would go sound by sound. But when I started the spelling lesson, what did I tell you? I-N-D says IND. And so if we hear the sound IND, we're just going to spell it I-N-D. And then if we get to words that don't have the IND sound, then I'll spell it to you sound by sound. Okay? All right, let's see if we can remember it. And remember to point. If you point to each word as we say it, it'll be easier to remember as well. All right? Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. Let's do it one more time. Ready? Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. And number 3 is blind. Repeat it with me. Blind. Blah. Blind. And we'll say the word together. Blind. All right, ready? Here we go. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. Here's the next sentence. Now just listen to this one. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. Number 4 is grunt. Say the word. Grunt. Gra. G-R. Now listen for the pitch on this one. Ah. U. What kind of a U? Is it U with another vowel or U alone? U alone says ah. Ta. And the word is grunt. Let's repeat the story. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. Number 5 is Miss. Say the word with me. Miss. I alone. Sa. And do we end words in a single S? No, we don't, so we have to put a second. If we put an E, it would say mice. So we'll put another S. Miss. Very good. Are you ready? Here we go. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. It helped him find his way. Number 6 is find. Fa. Eind. And let's say it together. Find. Here we go. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. It helped him find his way. Next sentence, just listen to this one. Amy was careful not to kick her shoes or grind her heels. Number 7 is kick. Say the word with me. Kick. Ka. Ka. C. K. Very good. At the end of a word, we'll have a CK. Now, how come I didn't use a C at the beginning of that word?
Because short word, if it's a short word and you don't know if it's a C or a K, it's gonna start with a K.
It might start with a K, right? What does CI say? It hisses, doesn't it? It says S. And so I don't want this word to be sick. I wanted it to be kick. So if the second letter is an I or an E, I have to use a K because CI or CE has a hissing sound, doesn't it? All right, are you ready to repeat the story with me? Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. It helped him to find his way. Amy was careful not to kick her shoes or grind her heels. Number 8 is grind. Say it with me. Grind. Gra. Eind. The word is grind. Here we go. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. It helped him find his way. Amy was careful not to kick her shoes or grind her heels. Here's the next sentence to listen to. That would make them dirty. Number 9 is dirty. Say the word with me. Dirty. Da. How do I spell I-R. Ta. And how do I spell E at the end of a word? Just Y. At the end of a word of 2 parts, we'll spell it with a Y. You ready? Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. It helped him to find his way. Amy was careful not to kick her shoes or grind her heels. That would make them dirty. She didn't want to split a fingernail. Split a fingernail. Number 10 is split. Say the word. Split. Spla. S-P-L. I. Alone. Ta. Okay, here we go. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. It helped him find his way. Amy was careful not to kick her shoes or grind her heels. That would make them dirty. She didn't want to split a fingernail. That might tear the yarn of her sweater. Number 11 is yarn. Ya. How do I spell R?
A-R-N.
N. Very good. Say the word with me.
Yarn.
All right, let's say the story. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. It helped him find his way. Amy was careful not to kick her shoes or grind her heels. That would make them dirty. She didn't want to split a fingernail. That might tear the yarn of her sweater. A queen cannot sit on the throne with a torn sweater. Number 12 is throne. Say it with me. Throne. Thra. O. N. And how do we make that O say O? And we say the word together. Throne. All right, let's repeat the story one more time. Amy was a kind girl who did not mind feeding the blind man's service animal. The animal gave a soft grunt so the man would not miss him. It helped him find his way. Amy was careful not to kick her shoes or grind her heels. That would make them dirty. She didn't want to split a fingernail. That might tear the yarn on her sweater. A queen cannot sit on a throne with a torn sweater. All right, now you may take just a moment to write the controls next to the words, and then we'll correct them together. Okay, are we ready?
Yes, sir.
Now what we'll do is take turns, and we'll say the word first, and then we'll spell it, and then we'll give the card and control. Does that sound like a good idea? Now, what will the rest of us be doing when it's somebody else's turn?
Be quiet.
Well, not talking is a good thing, but what else should we do?
Listen.
Listen. Listening is very important, isn't it? And being quiet and listening are not the same thing, are they? No. And so we need to listen because we need to make sure we spelled the word correctly, right? So should we check our work?
Yes.
So if somebody's spelling a word, should we use our pencil to follow along?
Yes.
That would be a good idea. Now, what if we make a mistake, Creed? I have a good idea. You ready? I should say, oh, that's terrible, and erase it. Should I do that?
No.
No? Why not? How about, Colton, I'll just tear my paper up and say I quit. That's not a good idea either. So do you have better advice for me?
I think you should cross it out and write it the right way.
Cross it out and then write it correctly next to it? Why wouldn't I want to erase it? Michaela?
Because it might mess up your paper and not look good.
Ironically, erasing looks worse than crossing things out. That's true. It might tear. Have you ever torn a piece of paper trying to erase?
Yes.
I have, right? But you know what the worst part of it is?
No.
If we, yes, June.
Might have got it right and you erased it and you didn't have to erase it when you already got it.
That could be. That's possible. But the worst part of erasing is that it hides our mistakes. Are mistakes bad things?
No.
No. Or is it okay to make a mistake in school?
Yes.
Isn't that how we learn?
Yes.
Right? So we don't want to hide our mistakes. We want to learn from our mistakes. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
Right? And this is something that when you talk to the older students, they might tell you. If we cross the words off that we spelled incorrectly and then we write it correctly, we're actually creating a study guide. Because if you were in 5th grade and your 5th grade teacher dictated 20 spelling words to you, and you could already spell 18 of them correctly, do you think you need to study all 20 words?
Yes.
If you already can spell 18 of them, do you need to study the 18 words that you can already spell?
2.
How many words should you study?
2.
The 2 words that you couldn't spell in the first place. But if you erased it, guess how many words you have to study? All of them, right? You have to do 10 times the work. How many of you want to do 10 times the work? No? All right, so let's not erase. Deal? All right. So we'll start at the table, and then those of you who are in your seats will have a turn to do some of this as well. So is it Alina? Is that right? Would you go first, please?
Kind. K-I-N-D. The control is I-N-D.
And what does IND say?
I.
Ind. And sometimes as a reminder that, remember, we don't, because I is the vowel, we can't use C because it would say signed. And is it good to be a kind girl?
Yes.
Yes. Michaela, would you want somebody to say you were a signed girl?
No.
That wouldn't make sense, would it? So we can put K at the beginning of our control. When we say K and then hyphen IND says IND. And that's just a reminder because the second vowel, or the vowel was I, so we couldn't start it with a C. All right. Jude, would you like to go next?
Mind. M-I-N-D. The control is I-N-D.
IND says,
I.
very good. Colton.
Blind. B-L-I-N-D. And the control is I-N-D. Ind.
Very good. Michaela.
Grunt. G-R-U-N-T. Control is you alone.
Very good. Creed.
Miss. M-I-S-S. And control is island.
And Ireland says, yeah, very good. Hayden.
Find. F-I-N-D. And the control is I-N-D.
Very good. And let's see. Would you do the next word, please? Yes.
Miss.
Actually, we're on number 7. Kick.
Kick. K-I-C-K. The control is I-C-K.
And what kind of an I do you see there? Is it I with another vowel? What is it? It's I,
C-K.
but I is alone. Is that right? So say I alone says it, and then CK. And this is another word that we can start the control with a K, just as a reminder that we couldn't start the word with a C, right? So you put a K hyphen I alone hyphen CK, and that would be kind of fun to write that control because the whole word is in the control. Isn't that fun?
Yes.
All right, good. Kristen.
Grind. G-R-I-N-D. The control is I-N-D. Ind.
Very good. Zoe.
Dirty. D-I-R-T-Y-I-S.
Now, I alone says I. Is the word dirty? Or is there something else that the I is joining with? Let's look at the word. Spell it with me. Are you ready? D-I-R-T-Y. So in that word, the I and the R join together to say what sound? You can kind of hear it behind your eyes. Okay, so we'll say the first control is IR that says and then what's the next part of the control? What other sound do you hear?
I.
What does that Y say at the end? T. So it makes what sound does it make? The E sound, right. So we could say Y says, and when we say says in controls, we'll write the equals sign. So Y says E, and we'll spell that E with another vowel, okay? All right, Christopher, would you like to give us the next word, please?
Split. S-P-L-I-T. Control I alone.
Very good. I alone says
It.
good. And Maggie?
Yarn. Y-A-R-N. And the control is A-R says R.
Very good. Ethan?
Number 12, drone. T-H-R-O-N-E. Control O plus.
And what does O plus mean?
O plus another vowel.
O with another vowel. And what does O with another vowel say?
O.
O with another vowel says O. Very good. Now, we're not going to take the time to do it this morning, but a lot of times after we do the spelling lesson, what we'll do is turn our paper over and do a recall, where we try to write all the words. What do you think would help us to remember the words? Yes, Zoe?
Writing them down again.
Writing them down again. And what would help us to remember which words to write? Tristan?
Not to memorize them.
Not to memorize it, but to
Look at them.
look at. And whom do you see in your mental image if we started to read these words? Do you remember Amy? Who's Amy? She's the...
Girl.
What kind of girl was she? Kind girl who didn't mind feeding the blind man's service animal. And sometimes he would grunt. So you see, the spelling story would help us to remember the words, wouldn't it? Isn't that nice? And we can see it. Can you see Amy in your mental image? What does she choose not to do with her shoes? She doesn't kick her shoes or grind her heels because that would make them dirty. That's right. And she doesn't want to tear a... That's right. So we know a lot about Amy, and Amy would help us to remember the words when we're doing a recall. So that's nice, isn't it? Okay, so we enjoy our spelling story. All right, so let's go ahead and turn our papers over. And those of you at the table, I'm going to go ahead and dismiss you to go back to the seats, and we'll let a new group of students come up for the part 2 of our spelling lesson, okay? So if you'd like, you can stand and come right behind, one more time, Alina, very good, and thank me for the lesson, and then I'll let you go back to your seats, and we'll have some other students come up, okay? So Alina, you can stand, and you may all stand pushing your seats. And you're welcome. Did you enjoy the lesson? Who's Amy? What kind of a girl? A kind girl. Very good. You're welcome. Did you enjoy the lesson? Yes. And what does IND say? That's right. And in this lesson, what did it say? Fine. Very good. And Jude, if you'll take your paper back with you, that would be good. And you can say thank you for the lesson, Mr. Reed. You're welcome, Colton. Did you enjoy the lesson?
Yes.
Did you have a favorite word that we spelled today? No? All right. Well, you're welcome, Michaela. Did you enjoy the lesson?
Yes.
Very good. Do you think that you and Amy might be friends?
Yes.
All right. You're welcome, Creed. Did you enjoy the lesson? How many words did we spell today? 12. Very good. You're welcome, Hayden. Did you enjoy the lesson?
Yes, sir.
I'm glad to hear that. Did you have a favorite word that we spelled?
Yes.
Which one?
Kick.
Kick. Very good. And why couldn't I put a C at the beginning of it?
Because it would say sick.
It would say sick. Have you ever kicked a football? Have you ever sicked a football? Me either. All right. Very good.